Leongatha, a quiet town in rural Victoria, Australia. Population: just over 5,000. The kind of place where neighbors know each other's names, where tragedy rarely touches the rolling green hills. But on the 29th of July, 2023, something happened in this peaceful corner of the world that would shock the nation and capture headlines across the globe. It was meant to be a simple lunch. A family gathering. Erin Patterson, a 48-year-old woman living in Leongatha, had extended an invitation to her former in-laws. Don and Gail Patterson, both in their 70s, were her ex-husband's parents. Despite the divorce, Erin maintained that she wanted to keep the family connected. Also invited were Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, aged 66, and Heather's husband, Ian, also 66. A Baptist pastor. A pillar of the community. 4 people. 1 meal. What could possibly go wrong? The house on Mickleham Road seemed unremarkable that Saturday afternoon. Erin had prepared what she would later describe as a beef Wellington. A special dish. She told police she'd purchased the ingredients from local shops, some from Melbourne. She was eager to impress, she said, to show she could still be part of the family, even after the marriage had ended. Her ex-husband, Simon Patterson, had been invited too, but pulled out at the last minute. A decision that would save his life. The tension between Erin and Simon had been building for months. Divorce proceedings. Property disputes. The kind of bitter dissolution that tears families apart. But Erin insisted none of that mattered that day. This was about moving forward. About reconciliation. At least, that's what she told everyone. The lunch began around midday. Erin served the beef Wellington. She ate from the same dish, she would later claim. Conversation flowed. Elderly parents catching up with their former daughter-in-law. A pastor and his wife being gracious guests. By all accounts, it was pleasant. Ordinary. Forgettable. But within hours, everything changed. That evening, Don Patterson began to feel unwell. Severe abdominal pain. Violent nausea. His wife, Gail, experienced the same symptoms. Across town, Heather and Ian Wilkinson were also suffering. The pain was excruciating, unlike anything they'd experienced before. By the early hours of Sunday morning, all 4 were in hospital. The medical staff at Leongatha Hospital recognized the signs immediately and transferred them to larger facilities in Melbourne. This wasn't food poisoning. This was something far more sinister. The toxicology reports would later confirm what doctors suspected. Amatoxin poisoning. Death cap mushrooms. Amanita phalloides. One of the deadliest fungi on Earth. A single mushroom contains enough toxin to kill an adult human. There is no antidote. Don Patterson died on the 30th of July, just 1 day after the lunch. Heather Wilkinson followed on the 5th of August. Her husband, Ian, survived, but required a liver transplant. Gail Patterson clung to life for weeks before succumbing on the 8th of August. 3 dead. 1 fighting for survival. And Erin Patterson? She claimed she had no idea how deathcap mushrooms ended up in her beef Wellington. She said she'd purchased a mixture of button mushrooms from a supermarket and dried mushrooms from an Asian grocery store in Melbourne. She'd eaten the same meal, she insisted. She'd even been to hospital herself with stomach pains, though she was released quickly. She was, she told detectives, as much a victim as anyone. But investigators weren't convinced. The questions began to pile up. Why did Simon cancel at the last minute? Had he been warned? Why were the leftover mushrooms nowhere to be found? Erin claimed she'd disposed of them in a food dehydrator, which she then dumped at a local tip. Convenient. And why, of all the dishes she could have prepared, did she choose one that could easily conceal the taste and texture of deadly fungi? On the 3rd of November, 2023, more than 3 months after the deaths, homicide detectives arrested Erin Patterson at her home. The arrest sent shockwaves through Leongatha. Television crews descended on the quiet town. Reporters stationed themselves outside the modest weatherboard house on Mickleham Road. Neighbors who'd lived beside Erin Patterson for years suddenly found themselves questioned about a woman they thought they knew. Did she seem capable of this? Had there been warning signs? Detective Inspector Dean Thomas led the investigation. Homicide Squad. Years of experience with Melbourne's most violent crimes. But this case was different. This wasn't a shooting in a dark alley or a knife attack in a moment of rage. This was calculated, methodical. If Erin Patterson had indeed poisoned her guests, she'd done so with a weapon that left almost no trace until it was far too late. The police seized everything. Computers. Mobile phones. The food dehydrator Erin claimed to have thrown away. They found it. Not at the tip as she'd said, but tucked away in her home. Why lie about something so easily verifiable? And when forensic teams examined it, they found no trace of mushrooms at all. No DNA. No residue. Nothing. Then there were the phones. Multiple devices. Erin had been deleting messages. Lots of them. In the days following the lunch, she'd systematically erased communications with numerous people. Normal behavior for someone grieving and shocked? Or the actions of someone trying to cover their tracks? The investigators dug deeper into Erin's background, into her marriage to Simon Patterson, into the bitter divorce, and they discovered something that changed the entire complexion of the case. This wasn't the first time someone close to Erin had suffered mysterious health problems. Simon's parents, Don and Gail, had expressed concerns to family members months before their deaths. They'd been worried about their son's health during his marriage. Simon had experienced severe gastric issues, hospitalized multiple times, unexplained symptoms that baffled doctors. And then, after the separation, after he'd moved out of the house he shared with Erin, the symptoms stopped. Completely. Was it coincidence? Or had Erin been practicing? The financial motive began to crystallize. Erin stood to gain substantially from the deaths. Life insurance policies. Inheritance. But more than that, there was the matter of a will. Don and Gail Patterson had been wealthy. Property owners. And while the exact details remained sealed in court documents, sources close to the investigation suggested Erin had expectations about what she might receive, even as an ex-daughter-in-law. Then there was the question of Simon himself. Why had he canceled at the last minute? Police questioned him extensively. He told them Erin had been insistent he attend. Almost desperate. She'd sent multiple messages. But something had made him uncomfortable. An instinct. A feeling he couldn't quite articulate. He'd pulled out, citing a prior commitment. When he learned what happened to his parents, to his aunt and uncle, he was devastated. And terrified. Had Erin intended to kill him too? Was this lunch meant to wipe out everyone who stood between her and financial security? Or was Simon always meant to survive, to live with the guilt, to watch his family die while he walked free? The forensic mycologist brought in to consult on the case provided chilling testimony. Deathcap mushrooms, she explained, don't grow wild in the immediate Leongatha area, though they can be found in parts of Victoria, particularly around European trees like oaks. Someone would have had to actively seek them out, to identify them, to know exactly what they were picking. And Amanita phalloides looks remarkably similar to edible varieties to the untrained eye. But Erin had claimed expertise. She'd foraged for mushrooms before. She'd posted about it on social media. She knew the difference. The prosecution's theory began to take shape. Erin Patterson, facing financial ruin from the divorce, had invited her former in-laws to lunch with the intention of murdering them. She'd carefully prepared a dish that would mask the deadly mushrooms. She'd ensured her ex-husband would be there too, but when he canceled, she went ahead anyway. 3 victims instead of 4. And then she'd constructed an elaborate lie about where the mushrooms came from, destroyed evidence, deleted messages, and hoped to pass it off as a tragic accident. But there was a problem. A significant one. Erin had eaten the meal too. Or had she? The only evidence of her illness came from her own account. She'd attended hospital, yes, but her symptoms were minor. Treated and released the same day. Nothing like the catastrophic organ failure the others experienced. Had she eaten a carefully measured amount to provide cover? Or had she simply avoided the poison portions altogether while pretending to share the meal? The community remained divided. Some who knew Erin couldn't reconcile the friendly neighbor, the devoted mother to her 2 children, with the cold-blooded killer police described. Others remembered small things. Odd comments. The way she'd spoken about money troubles. The desperation in her voice when discussing the divorce settlement. On the 7th of November, 2023, Erin Patterson appeared in the Latrobe Valley Magistrates Court. She wore a black jacket. Her expression was blank. Unreadable. The magistrate denied bail. Too great a risk, they said. The evidence too compelling. She was remanded to Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, a maximum security women's prison in Melbourne. And then she did something unexpected. She requested to speak to police again. Not through lawyers. Directly. She wanted to tell them something. Something she claimed would explain everything. The interview room was cold. Sterile. Erin Patterson sat across from Detective Inspector Dean Thomas and his colleague. This time, there were no lawyers present. She'd waived that right. She wanted to talk, she said. To finally tell the truth. What emerged over the next several hours was a statement that raised more questions than it answered. Erin admitted she'd lied. About the mushrooms. About where she'd obtained them. She'd been protecting someone, she claimed. A mystery person. She wouldn't give a name. This anonymous individual had allegedly provided the mushrooms, and she'd trusted them. She hadn't known they were poisonous. She was a victim too, she insisted. Manipulated. Used. Investigators didn't believe a word of it. The case dragged through the courts for months. Pre-trial hearings. Psychiatric evaluations. Media scrutiny that never seemed to end. Erin's children, 2 young boys, were placed in the care of relatives. Simon Patterson, now having lost both his parents and his aunt, struggled to comprehend how the woman he'd once loved, the mother of his children, could have done this. The prosecution spent over a year building their case. They tracked Erin's internet search history. In the weeks before the lunch, she'd been researching death cap mushrooms. How to identify them. Where they grew. The symptoms of poisoning. The timelines. She'd also searched for information about gastric illness. About how amatoxins affect the liver and kidneys. About whether traces could be detected in food. She'd visited specific locations known for death cap mushrooms. Her phone's GPS data placed her in areas around Leongatha where the fungi grew beneath imported oak trees. She'd been there multiple times in July 2023, days before the fatal lunch. But perhaps most damning was what investigators found in her deleted messages. Texts to a friend discussing her financial desperation. Her fear of losing everything in the divorce. And then, chillingly, a message sent just 2 days before the lunch. Sometimes problems solve themselves. The trial began in March 2025. The Supreme Court of Victoria. Erin Patterson pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. She sat in the dock, her face carefully composed, as the prosecution laid out their case over 3 weeks. The evidence was circumstantial but overwhelming. The internet searches, the GPS data, the deleted messages, the lies about the food dehydrator, the convenient disposal of all mushroom evidence, the financial motive, Simon's mysterious illnesses during the marriage, the mycologist's testimony that death caps don't accidentally end up in meals. Someone has to put them there. The defense argued accident. Tragic misidentification. Erin had been foraging, yes, but she'd made a terrible mistake. An error that would haunt her forever. She'd eaten the meal herself, hadn't she? Why would a murderer poison herself? The prosecution had an answer for that. Dosage. Erin had carefully controlled how much toxin each person consumed. She'd given herself just enough to create symptoms, to provide an alibi, but not enough to cause the cascading organ failure that killed her victims. It was theater. Performance. The act of someone who'd planned every detail. The jury heard from Ian Wilkinson, the sole survivor. Gaunt. Forever changed by the liver transplant that saved his life. He described the lunch. The conversation. Erin's insistence they eat more. Her attention to ensuring everyone finished their portions. He remembered her watching them. Almost studying them. At the time, he'd thought she was being a nervous host. Now, he wondered if she'd been waiting to see the poison take effect. Character witnesses painted conflicting pictures. Neighbors described Erin as friendly, helpful, normal. But others spoke of her financial obsessions. Her increasingly erratic behavior as the divorce proceedings intensified. Her resentment toward Dawn and Gail Patterson for supporting their son. Her belief that they owed her something for the years she'd been part of the family. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the 7th of July, 2025, they returned their verdict. Guilty. On all counts. 3 murders. 1 attempted murder. The courtroom erupted. Family members of the victims wept. Erin showed no emotion. She simply stared straight ahead as the judge prepared to deliver her sentence. Justice Michael Croucher addressed the court. He spoke of the calculated nature of the crimes, the breach of trust, the exploitation of a family gathering, one of society's most sacred rituals, to commit mass murder. He noted that Erin had shown no remorse, no genuine acknowledgement of what she'd done. Her lies had continued even after conviction. The sentence: life imprisonment, with a non-parole period of 35 years. Erin Patterson would be 83 years old before she could even be considered for release. As the guards led her from the dock, photographers captured her final moments as a free woman. Her expression remained blank, unreadable, the same look she'd worn throughout the trial. One journalist would later describe it as the face of someone who'd gambled everything on a perfect crime and couldn't quite believe she'd lost. Outside the courthouse, Simon Patterson read a statement. His voice broke multiple times. He spoke of his parents, of his aunt, of the uncle who'd survived but would never be the same. He spoke of his children, who'd lost their grandparents and would grow up knowing their mother was a killer. He didn't mention Erin by name. He couldn't bring himself to say it. The Mushroom Murders, as the media had dubbed them, became a cautionary tale. A reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself with violence and rage. Sometimes it sits across from you at a lunch table. Sometimes it serves you a meal with a smile. Sometimes it looks like someone you trusted, someone you loved, someone you thought you knew. Leongatha tried to move on. The house on Michelham Road was sold. The new owners painted it a different color. But people still drive past slowly. Still point. Still whisper about what happened there on that winter afternoon in July, 2023. 3 lives ended. 1 destroyed. 2 children left without a mother. And all for what? Money. Revenge. Pride. Perhaps Erin Patterson knows. But she's never said. And perhaps that silence, that refusal to give her victims' families even the small comfort of understanding why, is the cruelest act of all. The deathcap mushrooms grow still beneath the oak trees around Victoria. Beautiful. Innocent-looking. Deadly. Much like the woman who used them to commit one of Australia's most calculated and cold-blooded crimes in recent memory. Justice, in the end, was served. But for Dawn Patterson, Gail Patterson, and Heather Wilkinson, it came far too late.